Hey folks, this is Kalani. We've probably had one of the more exciting PvE races this time around with Trials of Valor, mainly due to the number of issues surrounding the fights and how guilds have taken advantage of them to get a step up on their competition. This has led to Blizzard being the most vocal that I can remember when addressing the concerns of the player base. This actually started a little bit before the world first guild bans for exploiting Helya, when quite a number of people found themselves banned after exploiting a buggy world quest, allowing them to stockpile artifact power ridiculously quickly. So I want to talk about Blizzard's reactions and communication during the last few months, and their current stance on exploits, bugs and bans. As I said, this kind of started with an artifact power exploit. If you missed it or weren't aware, there was a world quest in Suramar which awarded a significant amount of artifact power, but the world quest wasn't clearing off the map properly. People were able to repeatedly complete the world quest, gaining full credit and obviously full rewards in the form of that AP. A few people did this once or twice and realised something might not be quite right, whereas a good chunk of players, some of which were in the world first guild territory, decided it would be a grand idea not to only repeat this quest as much as possible while the bug remained, but to group up en masse so it would be much faster to grind and they could bring along as many guildies and friends as they could basically grab. All in hopes of reaching that 35th trait as soon as possible so they had a leg up going into Trial of Valor Mythic. The old notion of exploit early, exploit often might actually be dead, because Blizzard slapped pretty much everyone who exploited this world quest heavily with a temporary ban. We even got a nice little metaphor comparing the exploit to a real world scenario from Eon, which was fun to read. The bans landed just as guilds were getting ready to rush into TOV, so quite a few guilds were left without a good portion of their roster. When the news broke, a few people were disappointed, but many others felt robbed because there was no mention of what was going to happen to the wrongly obtained artifact power. And if a few days ban was all the punishment they were going to get, why not just exploit for the massive gains and deal with the minor punishment? A few days after that, Blizzard announced that they would in fact be removing all of the artifact power, and that was that. It seems it doesn't pay to cheat anymore. It's nice that Blizzard not only fully punished those abusing a blatant bug, but were quick with addressing the issue and announcing their plans for dealing with it. The communication is what I value the most, something we haven't always had when these issues have arose in the past. They were also very quick to then announce that the artifact power would in fact be removed when there was community backlash. As guilds got into Mythic Trials of Valor, it became apparent quite quickly something was wrong with both Odin and Guam. Guilds were getting the Mythic kill when they arguably shouldn't have, because the bosses were randomly deciding to not fight back. They just wouldn't use any more abilities and would stand there like a glorified loot pinata. This got so bad that many guilds who had no business in Mythic TOV were trying to repeatedly wipe on Odin to trigger this bizarre bug so they could get some free loot. This issue is a bit trickier, and I do believe no one was punished, loot removed or bans or otherwise, for the kills they may have wrongfully received. While Blizzard was a lot quieter on this problem, we did get a bit of information after the fact. Any guild who was progressing and the bosses decided to forget they were bosses and went down without a fight isn't necessarily the guild's fault, because they had no intent of triggering or reproducing the bug. It seems intent here is the key for whether or not you get whacked by the ban hammer. The AP exploit had obvious intent. You don't farm that bug without realizing what you're doing. Odin and Guam is a little different, except for those who were repeatedly pulling to try and reproduce the bug actively. I do believe if people had managed to blatantly bug the bosses for free loot, they may have faced some of Blizzard's wrath. And then we get onto the real deal, Mythic Helya and her breath bug. It seems quite a few guilds were using an interesting method of dealing with Helya's breath mechanic. Having the tank die during the breath would prevent adds from spawning in phase 1, and that was that. Very similar to some tank mechanics in previous raids, most notably Archimonde, which quite a few people were comparing this clever use of game mechanics to. The problem was that during phase 3, if you used the same tactic, Helya would refuse to breath again for the rest of the fight, completely removing one of the boss's mechanics. The main argument here was simply, if we can do it in phase 1 and that's our entire strategy, why would we change it for phase 3? Whether or not this is intended behaviour, it's quite clear when one makes a mechanic easier to deal with and one removes the mechanic entirely from the fight for the rest of the fight. I would say one is clever use of game mechanics, while the other is an exploitable bug. So we had 3 top tier PvE guilds banned, and Blizz took away their world 3rd, 4th and 5th kills as they used the same strategy to bug the boss. That was very clear cut what the problem was and what the punishment was going to be. One guild took it very well and basically said it was their fault and they were getting ready to get back into the race after the bans were through, while the others were a tad more salty. In an announcement from Exhausters specifically, a few interesting things came up. They weren't exactly as humble about it as Limit was, but you can understand why they'd be annoyed with losing their progression as well as having to sit still until the bans lifted. But the most interesting piece of the conversation was about legendaries and soft caps. A lot of top guilds were playing days upon days more than the average Joe, to the point where they basically discovered a soft cap on how many legendaries you could receive. It seemed to be quite easy and typical to get 4 legendaries when you were playing that much, and then see no more. Obviously, there are outliers with 5, 6 and even more, but the typical number was 4. It seems strange that pretty much everybody had 4 and they weren't dropping anymore. A 4 legendary soft cap. I honestly didn't think anything was going to come of this, but Blizzard surprised me yet again with an announcement that not only did the 4 legendary soft cap that had been theorized existed, they explained how it was implemented. It was a soft cap because the bad luck protection, which increases your chance of looting a legendary the more you play, wasn't being applied to any legendary after you got your 4th. That meant it was just incredibly lucky if you did get one past that. They also announced that they would be changing that so the bad luck protection worked after getting 4, thereby removing the soft cap on legendaries. To me, this was an amazing piece of communication. Not only were some of our theories actually proven by Blizzard themselves, they explained their reasoning behind the soft cap, why it was initially implemented, how it was currently working, and then how they were going to remove it. That kind of transparency hasn't been seen in a very long time, and usually for a good reason. It makes me really happy that despite the drawbacks and the lashbacks communication can often cause, Blizzard is still willing to talk to us. That's an amazing thing as far as community interaction goes. They didn't stop there though. Just recently we had another guild down Mythic Helya and released their kill video. Something was a bit funky with the breath and it seemed like they were bugging the ads, but this would fall closer to clever use of game mechanics rather than the previous exploit. The tanks were positioning in such a way that caused the ads to spawn all together instead of in the usual line. This made the mechanic easier to deal with, but by no means removed it entirely from the encounter. Remember, we made that distinction earlier. With the recent events, it's no surprise people were a little miffed, with another guild getting the boss down while playing around with the breath mechanic. Some were calling for the same treatment that other guilds received, but Blizzard was once again quite open and communicative about the differences between the kills and how they played out the entire encounter. The boss was breathing, damaging the tank and spawning the ads. The strategy was interesting, different, and probably not how the encounter designers intended, but no part of it involved a bug where she would not use an ability for the rest of the fight. Getting this kind of discussion from some of the head honchos at Blizzard is fantastic. We even got a few more bits and pieces comparing it to the previous raid bugs that we've seen, like the Lich King Saronite exploit. No matter what the case, we've had some great communication from the chaps who hold the strings, which I hope continues as we go forward. Hearing their thoughts on problems that the community is worried about is great. Seeing their expectations for dealing with bugs and abuses really helps solidify a sense that playing fair is the way to go, and the sheer transparency of how they decide what action to take, how certain systems are working and how they feel about those systems, and whether they are doing a good job or not, is invaluable to us as a community. We get a small peek behind the curtain that tells us they might just know what they're doing after all. That only makes me more excited for the rest of Legion and for World of Warcraft's future. And that's without talking about the awesome Q&As we've been having on Twitch. I hope it all continues going forward. It seems to be making WoW a better game overall. But that's it for this video. If you have any questions or queries, please leave them in the comment section below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always, I will see you next time.